All right, now let's get some more perspectives on this issue. We have in the studio public affairs analyst Emmanuel Oshemeka. He joins us to talk about this. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Well, many perhaps have thought that by now we should have been over this, given the fact that this policy took effect from the 15th of December 2022. And so the expectation is by now we should have been over all of this. But here we are. It's taking a new dimension. Protests across the country. Bank staffs are no longer safe. You know, you have attacks on ATMs. You have services, you know, halting and all that. Do you think that this has gone beyond the control of the central bank?
I wouldn't say it's beyond the control of the central bank. But you see, I think the first thing we need to look at is what is the intent of this particular policy. Some people call it the coloring of the Naira, some call it the change of the Naira and all that. But the Naira was not changed. It's just color change. That's what you have. And there is a reason for that. And specifically, if you listen to the CBN governor, when he, you know, put out the information on the intent of the change of the Naira, one, he said that there are too many illicit funds in people's homes. When he used the word people's home, he wasn't just talking about your house, my house, or just the politician's house. He was also talking about those bandits and all those kidnappers that have taken so much cash from people. If you recall, some people paid as much as 100 million per person to be freed sometime last year, and of course previous years. So when you look at those funds, looking at upward of 2.4 to 2.7 trillion outside of the banking services, that's dangerous. So that's one. Preponderance of this fund may not necessarily be in the hands of the bandits or kidnappers or what have you, right? They may also be in the hands of politicians, which we all know that our elections have been monetized because the politicians have successfully, you know, weaponized poverty over the years. So President Muhammadu Buhari, being a politician who suffered in the hands of money bags for many years, and of course, part of his legacies of 84 was also changing the currency as a tool for fighting corruption. And I believe 100% that this policy is not just an MFLA initiative. I believe 100% that President Muhammadu Buhari is probably touted this, and of course the CBN is the one implementing the system. As we speak, I've heard from very reliable sources that a lot of politicians and a lot of other fellows in government are buying houses in cash. Houses to the tune of 100, 200, 300, 400 million. A friend of mine who works in the bank told me that a particular group of people from, I wouldn't mention this service, but federal government agency, came that they had 9 billion cash they wanted to swap. Now, one of the major challenges people have with this policy is that they have used the word swap loosely. The central bank did not say currency swap. It never said so. It simply said that from XYZ date, these old currencies will no longer be in use. And this is like a follow-up to the previous introduced cashless policy, which began under Governor Charles Chukwuma Soludo in 2006, 7 or thereabout. Then, of course, Sanusi, Lamido Sanusi. You remember that they introduced the cashless policy, I think first in 6 states, then later to 12 states, and now we're going cashless 100%.
Mr. Oshemeka,
yes,
I think that we have gone a bit beyond this, because all of this came up shortly after the policy was announced. And I don't think there was a lot of pushback, because when they said Nigerians should take their money to the banks, a lot of Nigerians, we saw them taking the money to the bank. And even the CBN came out to confirm how much they had recouped or received within that period. Now, I think all of this came up again after people took in the money, the first deadline was approaching, and people could not access the new or the redesigned Naira. So I think that is the problem at this point.
Yes, that is the problem, and that is why I said that the interment, you can't divorce the interment with what is happening today. What exactly have we seen over the last 1 or 2 weeks? EFCC, ICPC, CBN staff have been monitoring the banks, and we've seen several banks where you have upward of 29 million stashed of the new notes, and they are not in ATM and they are not being paid.
In fact, we are seeing a report that is saying 250 million.
And there are several of them like that. So do you blame CBN for that? The answer is no. We've seen reports where a specific branch of a bank, where they hid the new notes behind the old notes stacked in their vault. That is not CBN. We've also seen these new notes in the hands of politicians and politicians' children at parties. They are spraying wads of the new notes. Is that CBN too? The answer is no. It is the deposit money banks.
But the CBN is the regulator.
Correct.
What are they doing about that?
CBN regulates, but you cannot blame CBN for that. Regulation is not, CBN is not supposed to micromanage the banks. CBN cannot be at every bank branch.
And in any case, it was 2 banks that we had this new money stashed. Because before then, why the CBN was saying that they had disbursed enough money, deposit money banks were saying they didn't have enough also. So we had that to the point that Nigerians didn't know who to believe at that point.
I can tell you in good authority that these monies were at the banks as at December. What the banks were doing at the time was, because this, you see, you can't separate the plans of the politicians from what is going on. The politicians want swap. That's where the word swap came from. Those who have cash stashed up want a swap. Some were successful. They were able to get this, the swap take place, but they didn't get probably the volume they want. I've just mentioned to you where somebody has 9 billion. Do you know what 9 billion cash is, man? Have you seen? 9 billion. There's no bank that has 9 billion in their vault.
Is it because the politicians want swap that the average Nigerian cannot get the money?
Yes.
Is it because of that that we see long queues of Nigerians in front of ATMs, in front of banks?
Absolutely.
Is that why?
Absolutely.
Is it because of that in rural areas now, some Nigerians are engaging in trade by barter?
Yes.
Is that why?
Yes. That's the truth. The problem you see today, forget the stories by the politicians. The reason why the governors are up in hand running to the president to extend this is because they have so much cash that they cannot put back in the system. That's why they want this to run side by side. What CBN's intendment is to reduce the volume of cash in circulation and for us to go cashless as much as possible. The idea is so that you don't go into the bank and go and withdraw 20 million, 10 million and go away. That defeats the intent of the cashless policy. So for example, during the period of the cashless system, in FCT, the cashless policy was in place. But in Niger State, the cashless policy was not in place. So if you want to withdraw 10 million, you can drive to the branch of your bank in Suleja there, and you withdraw it, cash, and come out. If you are in Borno State, in Maiduguri, if you are in Yobe, you can do cash, those kind of cash withdrawals. So what I'm trying to explain to you is that, yes, the CBN may have mopped up through the deposit money banks about 2.4 trillion. But the intent is not to put back 2.4 trillion. That will defeat the intent of that policy.
But
let me just chip in here. We have a problem here.
Yes.
This whole idea, yes, while it's a good policy and some Nigerians, actually do not have a problem with this policy. However, it's putting Nigerians in a desperate situation.
Correct.
If you look at electronic system, I mean, we talk about cashless, there are people who are ready and are willing to go cashless. In fact, for some people, even before the policy, they've been more or less cashless in the way that they operate, and all that. But now you are faced with a situation where even the electronic transactions are having huge problems. People are finding it very difficult to make transfers, to pay for things online. And so you can't even go to the bank. Now, perhaps you are even trying to make electronic transactions. You have a problem. You can't even go to the bank to make a complaint. You can't do anything because the banks are overcrowded and choked. You know, we are facing a situation where banks are almost on the verge of shutting down to save their lives.
They have.
So that's chaotic.
So that is also the failure of our system. Okay, so for me, I think one of the, like when I blame the politicians do not get these monies on their own. They get the money from the banks. It is the senior management of these banks that do the transactions with them. Because most often we blame the few branches, right? So the information I have is that the way the bank operates, banks are sort of segmented. So if you have a bank, a regional head, a regional branch of a bank, they probably tie like 20 or 10 branches to that regional branch. And it is the regional branch that goes to CBN, not each of the branches. So they go to CBN to get a specific amount of money, subject to what the CBN will release to them. And that money is meant to be distributed across the branches under that regional office. Now, what happens is that when that money gets to that regional office, it is that regional office that now distributes the money across the branches. Would you believe that in most cases, monies get to the regional branch of the bank, and the bank's probably supposed to do 1 billion to each of the branches, will end up giving some of the branches 2 million for a week. That's where the problem is.
Do we have any idea as to how much CBN is actually giving out to these commercial banks?
As of today, we do not have, but I believe it's a conversation that is worth exploring with the CBN Director of Currency Operation or any of the team. They should be able to say, because specifically this is the amount.
I say this, I got a wind of an information which I haven't been able to verify. Central Bank, perhaps during his discussion at the National Assembly with the lawmakers, said something around giving banks 30 million naira daily. You know, then that's in cash for the new naira note for distribution and all that. And I'm trying to wrap my head around whether that is actually true or not. And if that's the case, then perhaps those allegations about politicians actually stashing huge amount of cash may not necessarily be correct.
So, for example, confirmed by the governor of Edo State, in the last 7 days, CBN has given the banks in Edo State over 1 billion. Where's the money? Seven days.
Well, then if indeed, like you were saying, that these monies are getting to the banks and then the politicians are able to mop them up.
Correct.
And if the intention was to ensure that the politicians didn't have access to this money so that they would check vote buying, then would you say that the policy is succeeding? Because the poor people are the ones suffering, not the politicians who you
Absolutely. You're absolutely correct. Now, that is why, you see, the reason why we are here today is because there's an election. And people are desperate to win an election. And one of the tools they want to use to win an election is to buy votes, unfortunately. And that's why the demand for the currency is so high. If this policy probably, took place like 3 months, maybe 1 year ago, we may have similar problem, but it will not be this
So would
bad.
you agree with those who say the timing is poor?
Well, I'm not in government, and like I keep going back to the fact that there is a reason for this. The people who put up this policy, which is President Muhammadu Buhari and of course the CBN, they have a goal, a specific goal, and they are pursuing that goal.
There are some people who have said, I saw it on social media, there are some people who are saying that if the politicians have access to this new money, that means that they will be able to buy votes because the poor masses cannot access it, which therefore means that during the election they'll be excited to get this new money. That means that the vote buying will happen.
No,
isn't that dangerous?
There's no way vote buying will not happen. I can even shock you that as of today, before now, if you go to the bank, if you have a domiciliary account to withdraw your dollars, they will tell you there's no dollar. But do you know it's easier to withdraw dollars from the bank now than to withdraw your Naira notes? So vote buying can still happen using USD or any other currencies. Vote buying will still happen. They will still be able to do transfer. Like the issue of transfer you talked about, that is where the banking, the deposit money banks failed 100%. I don't know if it's a deliberate ploy to sabotage, because before now, the portals were working seamlessly.
Not effectively, not all the time.
They were working, but they were not as bad as it is today, that you can't even make a successful transaction in a whole
So
day
people are
or 2
making
weeks.
the arguments that perhaps it's because of the pressure now
The volume,
that is
yes.
on the system now. You
Yes.
have more people, trying to make electronic transactions, which is why we're
Absolutely.
seeing what we're seeing.
That's why some banks have shut down, and the excuse they are giving, which is yet to be proven if it's true, is that they want to work on their technological arm so that the pressure will reduce. Because a lot of people you see going to the banks, they go into the bank because the technology angle is not working. Because if we have a transaction and I need to pay you and I transfer to you, then you wouldn't need to be going to the bank to look for a cash. For some people like myself, I don't even remember the last time I had cash with me.
But are you aware that some service providers are currently rejecting transfer? Because,
Yes.
because they know that some persons have been able to generate fake alerts and
Yes, so these are some of these challenges that we've had, and this is also failure of the role of supervision. If the CBN had done their homework properly in terms of the consistent supervision, banking supervision, okay, because and honestly speaking, banking supervision is not the work of the CBN governor. I hope we understand that clearly, because everything is on his laps. There are directors, of note in the CBN. There are deputy directors, assistant directors, chiefs, and the rest of them who have specific responsibilities at the CBN. But unfortunately, these are the people who are dropping the balls on a regular basis, just the same way we have challenges with our civil service. So the major challenge we have today as a whole is overall collapse of system. We have the issues of fuel scarcity. Why do we have fuel scarcity? The excuse we are hearing from the NNPC MD is that, it is from the flood issue. It is this and that. It's just excuses left, right, and center. Why do we have those excuses? Because when you have incompetent people without proven track record of performance, they will fail at all times. That's where we have this problem.
How much of role do Nigerians, ordinary Nigerians, how much role can ordinary Nigerians play in this? Because let's talk about, say, POS operators, for instance, who are taking advantage of this. People have said, look, we blame leaders, we blame politicians for being corrupt and the rest of them. But here we are. Once we are faced with such a situation, we find people who are trying to
take
advantage of it. The same with the issue of the fuel scarcity, and now with the cash crunch, and just anything that appears to put people in a desperate situation, you would find people who are just trying to, take advantage of that. Is there anything we can do about that?
Wherever you have a system where there is no punishment for wrongdoing, you find things like this. As long as there is no punishment or no consequence for wrongdoing, sir, you will have situations like this. POS operators were licensed by someone. POS operators are supposed to be supervised by someone. When you hear that the people you license to do A are doing Z, what are you supposed to do?
Because this seems like it's aggravating the whole thing. I don't know.
So, for example, you are licensed by, is it NBC, right? Yeah. Is it NBC or they supervise you, whichever way? NBC. They are constantly monitoring you. There are certain statements I will say here, you will get a love letter, right? And possibly with some attachment, you must pay X, Y, Z. Why is that so? Because someone somewhere is interested in ensuring that we tone down our language and probably use the word, be more professional. Likewise, when you go to certain sectors of our life, you will see some level of regulation. Look at the years we had the late Professor Dora Akunyili. She came into the Drug Administration and Food Control, and she put her foot down and made sure that all the fake drug peddlers in Onitsha and Kanu and every other part of Nigeria, she ran them out of business. And some level of sanity was created. Look at when, for example, the EFCC, former EFCC chairman, Ribadu was in office. You would see that at that time, people somehow behaved themselves. When Idi Agbo and Buhari were in government in 1984, they came up with war against indiscipline. Back then, if you wanted to go into certain places, you naturally would queue, because if you don't queue, you know the consequences. But today, people do things and get away with it, and nothing happens. For example, banks, they've arrested 1 or 2 or 3 people. Probably, I don't know, I hope there is punishment for those people who hoarded the monies. If there's no consequences, it will repeat itself.
Do you think that we would have had it better if the POS operators, for instance, were part of this whole process in the first place? Recall that there were complaints by the POS operators when the withdrawal limits issue came on board, and that they are unable to withdraw as much to do business. Some of them say they can't withdraw more than 20,000 naira, and the rest of them, sometimes we see people using 5 ATM cards going to the ATM to withdraw. Some of them are POS operators, and all that. So if perhaps we had some kind of concession for POS operators, would it have changed anything?
Well, it may not, because the truth is, maybe one of the reasons why this cashless policy that was introduced during the days of Sanusi Lamido Sanusi was to the extent that we had a 150,000 limit. Maybe one of the challenges we have today is because of the 20,000 limit, and not just the 20,000 limits, to the extent that you don't even have enough funds in the vaults of branches of banks to service clients. So, like you clearly mentioned, that if the monies were distributed, or the new notes and the old notes were running side by side from December, probably we wouldn't have this situation. But I think we would have. The major challenge here is that, and I still go back to that point, the intendment. There is a specific goal that they are pursuing. After this election, they will reverse some of these policies.
Okay.
That's surely what I can guarantee.
Okay, but so at this point,
yes,
where do we go from here? The president is holding he has called for a Council of State meeting on Friday. However, we heard Alhaji Lai, the Minister of Information, talking about the fact that 5 political parties have gone to court to get an order. That is also a problem right now. So where do we go from here?
Well, there are 2 things that I think that can happen, or that should happen. One, increase surveillance and supervision. CBN must put their staff at possibly every branch of a bank, of all the banks, and ensure that monies are given. Because CBN says pay 20,000. Some banks were paying 1,000. Some banks were paying 3,000. Some banks, when you come, they tell you, oh, the money is exhausted. It's not even there anymore. So these are some of the things that CBN needs to take a look at, with a view to possibly increasing the volume of money. Because if you have people withdrawing 20,000, I don't think it will rub off negatively on the policy.
But aside that, why should people withdraw 20,000? Because I know that the CBN said the weekly limit for individuals was 500,000. Yes, and for corporate organizations, 5 million.
It's the same CBN that wrote a circular the other day and said that's limited to be 20,000, and that if anyone has more than one account, it should not be allowed to use more than one account. So what happens to the policy of the 500,000? That is why I said to you that there is a goal. You can't run away from the specific goal that the administration is trying to achieve. And until that goal is met, they may not permit us to go the way we were going before. Until after the election, we might likely go back to the 150,000 a day that you used to have before. You can withdraw from ATM, and of course, I can't remember how much you can withdraw over the counter. But today, as of today, the policy is that for every account holder, you can only withdraw 20,000. And corporates are not allowed to withdraw.
But we have seen businesses shouting, business owners crying that this policy is affecting their businesses. So we have business on the one hand, and then you keep talking about the intention being the elections. So Are we going to say businesses should just collapse because we're looking at the elections too?
These are decisions the government will have to take. And I keep mentioning the fact that there is an intendment, and that intendment is from the government. Okay, I'm speaking from reliable sources. There is a goal, and they are going towards that goal. The truth is, what I see happening in the next couple of days is that the banks are going to improve on the e-channels. So transfers will begin to go. It might not be perfect, but the transfers will begin to go, and that will calm nerves. And of course, the governors, the political parties that went to court went there as a preemptive measure because they also know that that goal serves their purpose to a very large extent. You see, vote buying helps the big political parties, especially the party in power. Vote buying, that's what it does. But unfortunately, what many politicians do not understand is that as at today, based on the current 2022 Electoral Act, vote buying may not even work. It may not even work.
Okay, I know that from when you started off, there are multiple reasons why this whole policy is not just about the elections.
Yes.
I mean, the cost of printing cash is one of them. Reducing the cash in circulation is one of them. Monetary policy, having effects and all that. These are some of the reasons that the central bank has given. But again, there's also another demography here. People in the hinterland, people in the villages and all that. We are talking about people in the urban centers who could even see ATMs. They could even see banks. There are places where you can't even see banks.
Yes, correct.
You can't even see ATMs,
correct.
And all that. Perhaps maybe POS operators and the rest of them. What should they do?
I think CBN had, I remember about a week or 2 weeks back, the CBN had a conversation on television where they talked about creating a special purpose system for the areas where you don't have banks. So for example—
Talking about the cash swap.
I think probably that's where the cash swap thing came up for the money. There are money, I can't remember the name they call them.
Agents.
Money agents that they have. Like if you go to Katsina State has about, I think, 23 local governments. Out of the 23 local government, there are banks in only 8 of the local government. The rest of them work with money agents. So there must be a system for those money agents. Okay. And don't forget, the CBN is in every state of the federation. So it is the responsibility of the CBN in each of those states to work with the agents they've licensed to be able to do this. But don't forget, these are money agents, and you give them bulk money. Trust me where it will go.
They could also become umpires.
But my major concern is with the farmers. There are a lot of farmers in Borno, Yobe, Gombe, and the rest of them that are in troubled zones. If you go to Borno State, you only have banks in Maiduguri out of the 27 local government. The rest of the local government does not have banks as of today. So what happens to the farmers in those communities?
So what can be done to take care of this group of people?
That is why the CBN also needs to be able to sit down and work out a system that will suit those people. It doesn't, I'm not able to, I don't have the full details of the volume of money or cash they put out to different banks, but at least they should sit down and extrapolate with proper bilateral conversation with these money agents or whatever system they've had over time. They should be able to work it out and make sure that those people do not suffer, because you don't bring up policy to suffer people, but sometimes there are necessary pains.
Unintended consequences. Yes. Well then, thank you so much for your perspectives on this. Emmanuel Osemeka, Public Affairs Analyst. We look forward to having you on the program. I must say it's been very insightful.
Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. All right, that's a wrap on the show for today. In case you've missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube live stream. I am Ayuba Ila. Join us again tomorrow for another time.
Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Stella Iyaji. Join us same time, same station tomorrow. For now, have a very pleasant day.